Welcome to the Self-Publishing School podcast. This is the podcast to listen to if you're an aspiring writer or an author who wants to be more successful. On this show, you'll learn how to write and launch a book successfully, all from the top authors and people just like you who are doing it at the highest level. I'm your host, Chandler Bolt, the founder of Self-Publishing School, the author of the book called Published, and the CEO of selfpublishing.com. For free training on how to publish a book that sells 10,000 copies, go to selfpublishing.com/free training.
You can watch all the cooking shows in the world, but if you don't get in the kitchen and start cooking, you still can't cook. You can watch all the sales training in the world, but until you have a consistent selling routine, you're still not going to make a sale. So that's what motivated me to write the book. I call it like the consistency pill. It's kind of like the missing supplement. If you want to be consistent, there's got to be a routine. There's got to be some time during the day where you block it off and you do that checklist. And because if you're not simple, then what happens? You become overwhelmed and you lose consistency. You're trying to figure out the perfect system instead.
Hey, Chandler Bolt here, and joining me today is Simon Chan. Simon is a consistency coach. He's the founder of MLM Nation. If you're watching on the YouTube channel, you can see that backdrop in the back there. He's also the author of a book. It's called The Consistency Pill, the 7-step system to increase sales and transform your business. And I'm excited to have him on the show here. Today, we're going to talk about exactly that, the power of consistency as an author in your business. We might even do a little case study with my company, do a little workshop here. Got a lot of stuff to learn. So Simon, welcome. Great to have you here.
Hey, Chandler, thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Well, I guess let's start with this. Why a book and how did you come to writing The Consistency Pill?
Well, I got started as an entrepreneur back in 2003. As I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, realized just getting a good education, which I did, graduated from Columbia and Ivy League. But none of that taught me how to make money for myself until I read Robert Kiyosaki's book. And then at that time, I just had a great job I loved, but it was very low paying. And wanted to start a business. I had no business skills, never did sales or marketing, and got started in direct selling. And from there, I built a 7-figure business. And then in 2012, I started doing coaching a little bit part-time, and then became a full-time coach in 2013. So over the years, going back to 2003, where I struggled for months, one of my turning points was when I picked up a book on how to sell. And it was Zig Ziglar's Selling 101. And the only reason I bought that book was because it was the cheapest book on Amazon for how to sell. So it was, I would go out there and spend buy $15 drinks and go out and spend $100 at a club and then have a party, hang out with my friends, but I was too cheap to buy a book. So I bought that book. I remember it was $8.97 at that time. And that got me in the path to personal development, right? And then this is way before YouTube. And then YouTube came out, and this is before YouTube. I used to buy these CD sets of Jim Rome. It was like $100. And this, again, my talent for buying stuff was increased from $8.97 up to $20. $20, I would buy $14 CDs back then, but $20. And eventually bought like $100, $200 sales course trainings. And then YouTube came. There's so many trainings out there. But back then, like 20 years ago, if you had a training, you had an advantage, right? Because I got to learn something that no one else did. I could be better. But now with free YouTube and all the content out there, there's so much, but people are still struggling. And the reason they're struggling is because they're not consistent, right? You can watch all the cooking shows in the world, but if you don't get in the kitchen and start cooking, you still can't cook. You can watch all the sales training in the world, but until you have a consistent selling routine, you're still not going to make a sale. So that's what motivated me to write the book. I call it like the consistency pill. It's kind of like the missing supplement for success, because all the training, I think anything you ever wanted to learn in the world is out there for free. And now it may take a lot of digging and finding, and depending on how much you value your time, there's a lot of shortcuts to that. But everything is free nowadays. But people are still stuck because they're not consistent.
So let's start there. What, because there's a lot we can unpack from the business stuff, from all that, but can you maybe give a big picture of some of the components of the consistency pill? Like, what are kind of some of the core components that you teach in that book and that you teach when you're working with people?
Well, the first thing to being consistent is I talk about the 7 components. That's a system, right? And Chandler, you've accomplished a lot of things in life. Whether you're new or not, you applied all these 7 components, right? And I broke it down to these components. So component number 1 is you got to have a checklist of what to do. There are a lot of people, they don't have a checklist. They say, well, a good example is I want to go to the gym and get in shape for this year, right? But what's the checklist? What are you actually going to go do in the gym? If you're not clear on what you need to do, then chances are there's going to be confusion, overwhelmed, and you're not going to get any results, right? Or you can stop. So number 1 is being clear on what you need to do. Number 2 is, I think one of the most important is you got to create and schedule the time. Right? If it's not in the calendar, it's not going to happen. And we live in the world of, this is the distraction economy. Right? I talk about the cell phones. You know what they are? You know what they really are, Chandler?
What's that?
They're weapons of mass distraction. That's what they are, right? Because we're constantly distracted. Weapons of mass distraction. So unless you block off time to do it, you're not going to be consistent. It's not going to happen. Like this interview is happening. I'm honored to be it because it was blocked off of my calendar because there's 100 other things I need to do today, right? So if you think I need to get in shape, well, number 1, what are you going to do? And number 2, when are you going to do it? And I think to give people some hope, we're all consistent in some area, right? So give an example is, I'm sure, Chandler, you took, I know you're super busy, but you took a bath or shower in the last 24 hours, right? Everyone's listening. You took a bath, or you're watching on YouTube. You took a bath or shower, and there's a routine to that. You got to create a schedule at a time. No matter how busy you are, you do it. Or maybe some of you make coffee every in the morning. There's a routine. So if you want to be consistent, it's got to be a routine. There's got to be some time during the day where you block it off and you do that checklist. 3 is you have a strategy on what to do. Like specific on the checklist, what do you plan to do? Like going back to the gym example, just 5 things. One of the things, the bench press. So what's the strategy? Are you going high reps, low weight, or high weight, low reps? Or what are you going to do? The pyramid exercise, there's so many different things. But what's the strategy? Number 4 is you got to choose the environment, right? That's why going to the gym, chances are you're going to work out way better than working at home, right? And that's why Peloton was really popular during the COVID, because there's the environment. You couldn't go to the gym, but you still got kind of this pseudo environment, taking an online class with people, right? You got to be in that environment. Number 5 is tracking your progress. You guys track. If you don't know what you're tracking, it's very easy to get discouraged and not stay consistent. And number 6 is using tools, doing specific tools. That could be simple as like a calendar, a timer, so you're not spending too much time on one task. Apps that can track your, so you can gamify it. And then the last part is accountability. If you don't have accountability, we all fall off. And going back to the gym example is, you may not want to go to the gym by yourself, but if you are meeting a friend, you're probably going to show up a lot more consistent. So I just touched on those really brief. I can go in detail more, but those are the 7 components of staying consistent.
I love that. And I think, as I reflect back on the success we've had with the business and all that stuff, I think it's a lot of these things that you're teaching underpin that. I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but I think if there was one thing people would say about me is he's disciplined, he's consistent, and he works hard. He's definitely not the smartest, definitely not the most gifted, the most whatever, but it's the Will Smith quote of he says, if me and you get alongside each other on the treadmill, 1 of 2 things will happen. Either I'll outlast you or I'll die on that treadmill. And so it's just like that dogged consistency. And I think it's really a secret to just like, it's the compound effect, right? So let's maybe contextualize this within the business realm. I know that you mentioned this at the start of the podcast. You've built a multi-million-dollar business, over 200,000 distributors. Obviously, a lot of this was probably the keys to your success there. So what are the core concepts from this that apply in the business environment, and specifically revenue generation or like business growth? Like, are there 2 or 3 things that you feel like, hey, these are the handful of things that you need to be consistent with?
Yeah. Well, when I started, I was a part-time, because direct selling is a part-time thing, right? You don't go like starting a full-time business. But the activities were the same. The activities is basically, whether you're doing direct selling, network marketing, or starting a software company, or selling houses, or brokerage, it's number 1, you need leads. You need marketing to get new people to talk to, right? And there's a saying like all business is conversational. So every day you got to put yourself out there to meet people, whether you're running ads or buying leads, which I've done, or generating your own leads online, or using social media, doing organic posts, paid posts. You need to generate leads, number one. Number two is you got to find a way where you're talking to those leads, whether it's through a funnel, which makes things a little bit simpler, or you're reaching out in person. For me, when I first started, I didn't know funnel. I just leads, I got a phone number, I'll call them. And then calling them, there's a series of steps. Or you can actually say that was a funnel. You send them back then, you send them to a telephone conference, recorded presentation, and then you get on a three-way call with your mentors and two or three people on the phone, and you talk to them and you close the sale, right? But those are basically the core activities for any business. You need lead generation, you need a sales process, right? Where you're exposing the presentation and then you're closing. And it could be through online or in person. Which could be low ticket sales, high ticket sales. It's the same thing. I think one of the keys to so I struggled for months, right? Even after I got that Zig Ziglar book, the turning point was I started being consistent. I started treating it like this was life or death. I had to make it. And I had a mentor that pushed me hard. And I started carving out time every day on my job at 4:30. I'll make some calls. At lunchtime at 12 o'clock, I'll spend 15, 30 minutes and doing reach outs. So for example, initially I reached out to my friends and family. After I ran out, I bought leads, right? And then as the leads came in the morning, I'll call them during lunch. And most of the leads were not interested. And then I learned to generate, buying these leads, they're not good. Let me generate my own leads. Same thing, once the lead came in, if I had a break, my first break, I'll call them. Most of the time I couldn't get hold of them, send them an email, leave them a voicemail. If they call me back, I'll get in touch with them. It's doing the same thing and making it simple. I think sometimes people, especially now, you have to have these complicated funnels. It could be as simple as, you do a post on social media, people comment on it, you reach out to them, hey, thank you for liking my post. How did you find me? And starting that conversation and seeing whether they're interested or not. So I think those are the keys, focusing on those income producing, those sales activities, and keeping it simple. And because if you're not simple, then what happens? You become overwhelmed and you lose consistency. You're trying to figure out the perfect system instead. Right? It's like if you had to pay rent and pay for food to get money for food tonight, you're not going to create that system. And I think a big mistake that people make is, I was reading this somewhere, I think it's from the E-Myth back in the day. It was like if you 90% of your activities for like a traditional brick and mortar business, right, to hit $1 million, 90% of the time needs to be spent on sales activities. And then the systems come in, right? Because if you have systems, but you don't have sales, your company's not going to survive, especially if you're bootstrapping it. But if you have sales, but you don't have system, you can still survive for a while to get those systems built. So you got to focus on those sales activities.
That's good. I'm just taking some notes over here because I love that. If you have systems but no sales, you're not going to have a business for long. But then also how early on, 80 to 90% of your time needs to be spent on sales and marketing. And you mentioned lead generation and sales, and just making that a daily activity and a daily habit that you are consistent in. Obviously, with running MLM Nation, I'm sure there's some core things that you teach there, and I'm sure there's some things that you do in your own business to do that daily. What does that look like, and what do you teach on that?
Are you talking about for people that I'm teaching or people for my own business?
Either one. So either in the people you're teaching in MLM Nation or just in your own business, like what are those daily lead generation and sales mechanisms that you're recommending?
So what I teach people in MLM Nation, my coaching members, is the same thing that applies to any business. Number one is you have to do some type of social media every single day. Like I recommend 3 posts a day, right? Could be 1 post, and these are not commercial posts. These are just value posts, right? Inspiring, entertaining, or teaching them something. And you can do stories. So I'll give you a good example. Like my goal is I want to get like a Sprinter, like a whole decked out Mercedes Sprinter with like 170 feet one. With my wife thinks I'm crazy, but I want to do it because my kids do baseball. I want to, instead of getting an Airbnb, I just want to live in that Sprinter. I think it's something I've always wanted, right? So one with a bathroom, a shower in that Sprinter. So I go on Instagram. If you're being salesy, I immediately don't want to follow you, right? But one of the best accounts, and I was on there last night, was the ones that showing me, teaching me, oh, this is the setup, this is the bathroom, right? This is a different type of bathrooms, the water, the toilet system. This is how you can get the folding chairs, how you can fit the type of beds you can put in there. Value, right? And all of a sudden I'm following them. And then when I'm following them, there's trust built. And chances are when I get a Sprinter or get it renovated, I'm probably going to go buy from one of those places, right? So number one is you got to be on social media, giving value every day. Number two is you got to be meeting new contacts. Again, going back to lead generation, the leads can come from advertising, buying leads, or simple. Everyone who's liked your social media post, just connect with them, start a conversation. The other leads, if you did a social media post and 20 people liked the post, reach out to them, say, hey, thank you for liking my post. How did you find me? That starts a conversation, right? And it doesn't mean the person's going to buy, but the purpose of social media is to create a conversation, potentially create a conversation. So that's number two. You do social media, number one. Number two, you meet someone new, meet new contacts. Number three is you invite them. You simply ask them whether they're interested to learn about what you have to offer, right? Most people are going to say no, but you got to ask. It doesn't hurt to ask. Number four is you follow up with people who said no to you in the past, or you have met someone in the past. Ask them if they're interested to look at what you have. And number five is you have to present. You got to share with them what you have to offer. And if you're starting off, part five is probably not going to happen. But if you do those top four things, just say you do it for 2 to 4 weeks, you immediately going to have a lot of people who want to learn more about what you have. That's when you do the presentations, and that's when you can close.
That's cool. So that's great. So posting 3 times a day on social, that's step one. Step two is starting conversations based on people who engage, start and creating new relationships, new contacts. Yep. Then asking them if they're interested in working with you or hearing more about what you have, and then following up the 4 steps. I hope you're loving this episode so far. So if you're serious about writing and publishing your book, we would love to chat with you and help create a custom plan. All right. So all you need to do right now is go to selfpublishing.com/schedule. Schedule a 45-minute consultation with one of the experts on my team. All right. Let's implement what you're learning in this episode and let's see how we can help with your book. Go to selfpublishing.com/schedule. You said for the 5th step, presenting and sharing what you have to offer. What do you mean by that? Do you mean like speaking and giving presentations, or what does that mean?
It could be an online presentation. So for example, step 3 is asking, hey, Chandler, I'm working on something exciting and may or may not be for you. Would you be interested in taking a look? Right? Just setting that out to at least 5 people a day. And you may say, no, Simon, I'm busy. No, I'm working on this book project. No, I got exciting. It's fine. I ask, but maybe if you ask enough people, one is like, yeah, what is it? Tell me what you have to do. That's when I can send a presentation to you.
That's cool. I like that phrase. I'm working on something exciting that may or may not be for you. Would you be interested in learning more about it? Yeah, and taking a look. So I guess once someone gets out of the startup phase or even the 7-figure stage, because you said, hey, 80, 90% of your time needs to be spent on that. Once they grow above that, what percentage does that look like? And now I feel like it's almost becomes teaching those rhythms to the team, right? Or is that how you look at it, or you see that differently?
Yeah, well, it depends on what industry you're in. Then you need systems created. In direct selling, you'd be spending more time in the direct selling. It's not even a million. It's about like when you hit 9,000, 10,000, right? You need to start duplicating yourself, getting people to do what you did to teach it to them, pass it down. If you're in more of a traditional brick and mortar business, then you got to start thinking about building a team so that a lot of the stuff that are mundane, like, for example, coming up with a follow-up system, right? Or just say I'm thinking of a real estate agent, digging, finding the listings, posting stuff. That could be outsourced to your team because your most valuable resource is your network. Right, the highest income activities is, as an entrepreneur, is your relationships, and then the vision, the thinking behind it. More time needs to be spent on thinking of where you're going to take the business going. It's going to go back to 80-20 rule, right? And eventually, if you get a brokerage big enough, you're not even doing the sales, but you're taking where are you going to take the business, the thinking time. So something that I've learned over the years that I got in a habit is I take 3 days, the first 3 days of every week. In the mornings, I don't take any calls. I don't do any podcasts or interviews, or I don't even do any coaching at all. It's just more on strategy and thinking time, right? What I call the execution time, where I'm where's the business going? What do I need to do? Maybe it's numbers or research. I'm spending that time. And I normally spend Thursday, Friday on the calls. Even today, we're recording this on a Thursday, the calls and podcasts, because most of my high level brain energy is focused, has been spent already on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday on where the business goes. So working on the business and not working in the business. Most people spend a lot of time working in the business and they're stuck, right? You got to spend time working on the business.
Cool.
But in the beginning, working on the business and working in is the same thing. It's generating sales just so you can survive.
Yeah, I love that. I always say, if you don't have sales, you don't have a business, you have a business idea. A lot of people try to start a business and they want the logo, they want the LLC, they want the website, they want all the things. You need sales.
I want to share a story with you, right? Getting back to the 90%. So one of my former business partner, he's very successful now. He's in his mid 30s, owned multiple properties, has his own brick and mortar business. But we met in direct selling. And before that, he actually started his own little renovation company. They're doing house projects. And you know how he got started? He got started, again, not worrying about the logo, the office and all that. He got started by knocking door to door. Right, because he wanted to do real estate investing. Like, this is way back 20 years ago, but he had no money. So he's like, I'm going to just renovate houses to make some money, to save the money to buy real estate. So he knocked door to door. And when he found out someone was about to get the bathroom fixed, he would just undercut someone. So he told me his first client he got was, he's going to fix the bathroom. And he's like, what quote did you get? I said, well, this guy's going to do it for 20 grand. And he said, well, I'm not licensed, but I've done a lot of work, but I'll do it for 12 grand. And the guy's like, really? And he just did that. And one person actually gave him a shot. All right, I'll do it and I could deliver. And that person said, in 4 weeks, I'll deliver in 3 weeks. I'll get it done. And so he got hired. They put a down payment. You know what he did? He had no idea how to fix bathrooms. He said he spent the whole weekend at Home Depot reading those books and learning how to do the bathrooms. And then on Monday, so he spent Friday, Saturday, Sunday at Home Depot. It's like 12 hours reading those books. He didn't have enough money to buy them because those manuals are like $50. He would study them. And on Monday, he started his job.
You're kidding. But he had a business because he had sales.
Well,
right?
he had a business, but he's got his first customer, right? He spent his time knocking door to door, and that's how he got started.
And so that's an important note for folks who are trying to start something is validate, right? Get business validation, and people who pay attention, right? And they're going to vote with their credit card. And so because if you ask people, hey, I'm thinking about starting this business, do you think this is a good idea? Everyone's going to say yes, even if it's a bad idea. But if you ask someone, hey, I'm thinking about starting this business, would you become a paying customer? Now that's a totally different thing, right? So they vote with their credit card, to your point, and now they're a customer, and now you have a business, right? So validate first. A lot of people build, then sell. I'm a big fan of sell, then build. So flip the process so you know that you're building something that people actually want and actually need. Yeah,
I want to share something. I read this from Nick Huber. I don't even, he's like building an 8-9-figure business. He wrote a great email yesterday talking about the 2 worst advice that people give, right? And I know if you gave this advice, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to refute you. But the number 1 is do what you're passionate about, right? That's, I think, one of the worst advice, because do what you're passionate about. That means, for example, I love baseball training. I should start a baseball training business, right? That could be the worst advice because there's no market for it. What you're passionate about doesn't mean there's a market for it, right? So you see a lot of people, I want to do what I'm passionate about, but there's no one out there. And even if it's out there, it doesn't pay very well. Or that's number 1. Number 2 is do what you're good at, right? But the chances of what you're good at and what you're passionate about is there's millions of people that love to do that too. So it's generally because the market and supply and demand is very, very low paying and extremely competitive and hard to get in. So I want to be an NBA player. I want to be a professional basketball player, but 100 million people in the world wants to do that too. So it's going to be really, really hard. If you're 6 feet, it's probably not going to happen, right? But if you want to say, I want to do sales and marketing to target this niche, or I want to start a book publishing company, that's a huge need for that. There's not many people want, and it's actually very, very difficult. So then there's a huge market and you get paid reward. Anyway, I just want to share that. I thought that was so good because choose your passion, do what you're good at. I'm good at cooking. Yeah, but so is everyone else. They love to do that. There's no money in it.
That's good. I like that. So let's keep pulling that thread of implementing the consistency pill in your business. We'll circle back in a bit and talk about how this applies to authors. But so we talked about, all right, early on, 80, 90% of your business. I want to use my business as a case study. and I want to hear how you would approach this. So selfpublishing.com, we'll probably do 13 million or so this year, 12 or 13 million. Got about 70 employees, scaling that mode. How would you look at it for me? What percentage of my time should be spent on sales and marketing? But then also, how would you look at it for the team? Like, would you teach that across the whole team? Would you specialize it in one area of the company? Like, and then I got a bunch more questions about like the consistency pill, implementing it on like an organizational level. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. You put me on the spot here. I don't know enough about your business I feel like you're accurate advice, but I think your time needs to be spent on how can you 10x the business? What do you need to do to 10x the business, right? And I don't know the answer to that, but you probably do. And if you do know that answer, then you need to spend 90% of your time, 80%, 80-20 rule, right? 80-90% of time needs to be spent on what to 10x. And generally, because of the 10x, the stuff that you have to do is probably stuff that you're not doing yet. So you got to let go of the things that are taking about a lot of your time. And maybe someone else can do that. So building the team and delegating that, creating the systems in place so you're removed from it so you can spend on the stuff that's 10x it, right? Whether maybe this podcast is part of the 10x plan, then how do you make this podcast better? How do you grow this podcast more? And that probably requires relationships or maybe additional episodes or increasing the production of this episode, whatever it is, right? Or maybe it's spending the time to increase your sales staff to doubling it. So then you're spending the time interviewing, recruiting the people. Because you have like, 7 employees, right? It's still very small. You have 70 employees, right? So you're working with the, 70 is still relatively very small. You personally know each of the employees. So you're spending time to grow that team instead of what are you doing. So to 10X, what are the things you need to do? What are the things you have to stop doing? That's the first thing I would look at. Cool. And to make sure your salespeople who are going out there, are they staying consistent with the numbers and are they hitting the quotas? And if not, what's the bottleneck that's preventing that from happening?
That's good. And you talked about, or I looked in, from your bio, it talks about being a consistency coach. What does that mean to be a consistency coach? And how do you coach people and help people increasing their results in their business?
So most of the people I coach are small business entrepreneurs. They're not the business like entrepreneurs like your size. They're just starting out. They haven't hit the first 6-figure month yet. So a lot of it is just lack of consistency because of overwhelm, right? They're doing too many things. They're like a solopreneur, or they have like a couple freelancers. They don't have like 70 people, so they struggle with the attention scattered, and all of a sudden they're not doing the sales and marketing, or they're not spending time growing the business and thinking about the one thing, how to 10x. So my thing is creating routines, and it's more about accountability, pushing them hard, making sure they show up. So I'll be like I was working with you, Chandler, what did you do yesterday? What are the things that you did that help you get to where you are? And if not, then why not? Right? It's not because these people are not lazy. It's normally because they're doing too many things. So it's like, wait, can you give up something you stopped doing? Right? Or relationships in the team that are not they're more like toxic in terms of could be giving them negative energy or taking the time that someone else could be talking to. You don't need to work with that person directly. Right? That person should not directly be talking to you because it's sucking up your time to focus on what's important.
That's good.
So it's kind of like the gym trainer that keeps pushing the person and making sure that. So if the person is like not benching as much in the gym, then why not? You've been working out because you didn't sleep enough. Then why not? What's causing you, right? Or you have a bad diet. Well, what's causing the bad diet? Oh, because I don't have time to eat healthy. I'm eating fast food. Then what is that thing? Just get into the cause and eliminating that cause so they can get back on track.
It's good. And what do you need to stop doing and prune to make way for the stuff that's most important? I think that really hits home for me personally, because you've probably heard the quote, most businesses don't die of starvation, they die of indigestion, right? It's of trying to do too many things. And so I think as we've scaled, you just add, you add people, you add software, you add initiatives, you add products, you add. And as I look at, some of the struggles that we're having in the business right now of breaking through that next growth plateau, I feel like we're about to go into, and really are, quite frankly, already are in it. It's just a season of pruning where it's like, okay, we need to stop doing this. We need to stop working with that person. We need to stop using this software, stop selling this product. We need to just prune for a few months to make way for new growth. And I feel like, I don't know, that just really hits home. I guess with some of the folks that you're coaching, is that mostly when you're holding them accountable to be consistent, it's mostly holding them accountable to consistently doing revenue generating activities?
Yeah.
Like we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
And, I want to add to what you just said. Two of the best books I read, and I read them like once every couple of years. And I just reread them back in December because I was in the same pruning stage, right? Where is the one thing by Gary,
yes,
right? And the essentialism. Yes. The one thing I always get this too confused because they're very similar,
kidding.
Right?
You're kidding.
Essentialism, and one thing, and that's like your success was based on one thing. Right. Mm-hmm. My success was based on one thing, but sometimes we get so much stuff and then we kind of lose focus on what made us great. Instead of making the great thing even better, we just hack on more things because not often it's because competitions, the competitors doing that. Oh, I can do that too. And then we kind of lose our advantage. And then we become like what you said, you're doing so many things. They're all good, but they're not great. And instead of like doubling their income or 10 times the business, we're just slow growth. We move out of our expertise.
That is good, man. It's so funny you mentioned that. I've never met anyone else in my life that does that. But I literally, same exact thing. The one thing in essentialism, I remember probably about a decade ago, I read them back to back for emphasis. And it was just it really helped me focus. And then I would, every few years, read them back to back. It's just so funny that you mentioned that because I've got a similar pattern and I think I'm due for a reread. It's been too long. Maybe that's the problem.
Yeah, it's because naturally we're the distraction economy, right? We get so many ideas. Oh, we see a post, you see, well, we could be doing that too. And I just be totally transparent and vulnerable. Like we started that. I'm having laser focus in our podcast. We're the longest running podcast for interviews, right? We've been interviewed 800 top leaders in direct selling. We're the first ones to do it. We're the longest one, over 800 episodes since 2015. And that's what made us MLM Nation successful. And then because I want to do this, I want to do events, I want to do this, I want to teach about online recruiting, I got distracted. And lately, it was like, hey, people know me because I'm consistent or because of the podcast. We're going back to that core and we're going to 10x our game, get it better, and just promote it. And we had huge following, dwindled. We still have a very loyal following, but it's my fault because I started doing too many things. And they're all good, okay, but not great. But the podcast was great. And I took my attention off it.
That's good. That's good. That's a good reminder. What, Simon, how do you how would you apply some of these principles or recommend applying some of these principles of the consistency pill for our authors that are listening to this, who are working on either writing a book or promoting that book?
Yeah. I talk about that in the book because when I wrote my book, I took me forever to get it done because I was struggling with consistency, right? So then I started applying that consistency component and I got it done. So number one is the checklist, right? You know what specifically you need to do. But number two is most important is create and schedule the time. If you're waiting to I want to work on the book when I have time, I'm sorry, you're never going to have time, right? So for me, how I got the book done was every day from 6:30 to 7, which is 30 minutes a day, I worked on the book. And then within 2 months, I got it done, right? It's just like every day, 6:30 to 7. The other thing I would share with you is I always had a coach. I always had a coach that pushed me to hold me accountable every week. Then it became every 2 weeks. We always talked to make sure I hit my word count and did all that. I also had a tracking, make sure how many words I wrote every day. And then another part of it was choosing the environment. Music is a big part of it. I talk about music triggers. For example, if I played a certain song, it would trigger you back to your high school days, Chandler, right? That's like an NLP that Tony Robbins talks about. So I would play the same song on repeat over and over and over again every time I worked on the book. Where once I play that song in the morning, I'll immediately get into book mode for 30 minutes. And then within 2-3 months, it got done.
That's cool. I like that. And it's incredibly important if you want to get your book done, right?
Yeah, and you have to have that coach too. I think that's what you guys do, which is so invaluable, right? Because you're so busy. There's a million things going on. It's school, like summer, and they have kids, and you're not going to get it done. You need someone to push you. It's like you want to be the best. Like if you're working with self-publishing.com, you want to be the best, right? It's just like, I want to be the best. I want to get in the best shape of my life. I just don't go to the gym. I hire a trainer and I make sure I show up. So that's why it's so important. That's what I love with the stuff that you do, because you're holding the person. That's component number 7 is accountability. Without accountability, without tracking, you're just not going to get done. And even if you get it done, it's just going to be a so-so job.
That's good. Simon, this has been really fun, man. I've enjoyed this conversation thoroughly. What would be, just as we close here, where can people go to find out more about you, your book, MLM Nation, whatever would be most helpful for folks?
Yeah, they can find me on Instagram, on Facebook, Simon W. Chan, or just go to the website, simonwchan.com, and I'm there. And you can also find my book on Amazon, The Consistency Pill.
Cool. simonwchan.com. The book, again, is called The Consistency Pill. Check it out. Simon, you're the man. Thank you so much.
Hey, thank you for having me, Chan. It was a ton of fun. And it's great questions. You put me on the spot. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you. Thank you so much for watching or listening to this episode of the Self-Publishing School podcast. I know there's so many places that you could be spending your time. There's other podcasts that you could be listening to, YouTube channels that you could be watching. So thank you so much. It means the world. Now, I want you to do 3 things right now if you found this episode helpful. I don't know if you know this, but we've got a YouTube channel. It's a companion channel to this podcast. All the video versions of the episode are on the YouTube channel. So number 1, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Number 2, if you're listening to this podcast wherever, whether this is Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Number 2, I want you to subscribe to this podcast right now so you don't miss a future episode. And then number 3, this is probably the most important, leave a review on the podcast. All right, reviews are super important and help this podcast get discovered by other people. So number 3, leave a review on the podcast. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you so much for watching or listening to this episode of the Self-Publishing School podcast. I know there's so many places that you can be spending your time. There's other podcasts that you could be listening to, YouTube channels that you could be watching. So thank you so much. It means the world. Now, I want you to do 3 things right now if you found this episode helpful. All right, number 1, I don't know if you know this, but we've got a YouTube channel. It's a companion channel to this podcast. All the video versions of the episode are on the YouTube channel. So number 1, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Number 2, if you're listening to this podcast wherever, whether this is Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Number 2, I want you to subscribe to this podcast right now so you don't miss a future episode. And then number 3, this is probably the most important, leave a review on the podcast. All right, reviews are super important and help this podcast get discovered by other people. So number 3, leave a review on the podcast. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next episode. If you're on the fence about scheduling a publishing consultation call with my team, maybe you're not quite ready for that, I've got some free training that I think will be really helpful for you. All right, all you have to do is go to register to sign up. Go to selfpublishing.com/free training. When you do, you're also going to get a free digital copy of my new book published. And on that training, you're going to learn the next steps, so how to implement with your book. So how to write, how to publish, how to launch successfully. So go to register right now at selfpublishing.com/free training. I'll see you there.